issues there is to have a local content regulation which will ensure that Zambians actively participate in the mineral resources value chain. We are also looking at the institutional arrangement so that the ministry can respond to the opportunities that are presented in the mining sector. As I conclude, maybe just to indicate that the mining sector has been prioritized as key in transforming the economy, and also that this sector is able to create and generate more jobs as it were. Thank you very much.
I think what is important for us is to look at the long term and say, can we get over this process and be in a position that we do not fall back into this kind of situation? We are caught up in a vicious cycle. So what we need to do is to address the fundamental challenges within the economy for us to have real debt sustainability. It's not good for us to just have a strategy of knowing how to manage from crisis to crisis. It's a question of saying, can we move away from this vicious cycle and achieve sustainable growth so that we don't need to be negotiating every time. The IMF becomes like a permanent resident of Zambia. That's not supposed to be the case.
It's along the same line. I think over the years what we tend to hear about a moderator is the mistake that rescheduling debt will lead to sustainability. It's a grave error. Government is currently shying away from the revenue side of what will pay that debt. Even hypothetically, the numbers that Mr. Kabo gave, 20 billion US dollars, that's 13 in the context of central government debt and 11 in the context of domestic debt. Even assuming we restructure that for the next 30 years, we are failing to pay at $400 million. We found that uneconomical. Then the second component is that once we restructure, we are talking about non-productive pensions. My question to Mr. Kabo is, why don't we restructure in the context of those businesses that have benefited from this debt? An example is Kazungula Bridge. You've got $200 million sitting on that. It can pay for itself. So why don't you come up with a policy that Kazungula Bridge starts to pay for its debt? We've already seen the figures from Zambia Revenue Authority in terms of what Kazungula Bridge is earning. Then we have ZESCO in the context of private debt. ZESCO has increased its capacity to something like 2,700 megawatts from its deficit position of about 1.7. It means that ZESCO today, where it's seated, should be making more money than it was making when we were under load shedding. Why doesn't it become a policy that ZESCO pays from its extra power? Let's forget about restructuring. Let's forget about the challenges about the high indebtedness. Those are known, they are given. You are over-indebted, you are going to suffer. Let's shift to the revenue side. We are shying away from taxation, mining taxation. You have talked about increasing productivity to 3 million tons. That is also risky. In that sector, you increase to 3 million tons, the price of copper is going to collapse. So you are as good as sitting at 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 a ton. So let's focus on the revenue side to see how we are going to come out of that, as Dr. just alluded to. That's my intervention.
Thank you, Moderator, and thank you, Director. My question is just on the timelines. Apologies if I missed it maybe during your presentation. I just wanted to find out if you've got an approximated timeline based on the financial assurances that we got from the Creditor Committee, when we'll be able to come up with a finalized debt restructuring process, and as well as going to be able to get extended credit facility. So just probably an approximation based on that next month, I think 20th September, our 750 bullet payment will be due. So to be able to give us approximated timelines, and then also if we're able to meet the 20th September, or what happens if we don't meet the 20th September in terms of the debt restructuring. Thank you.
Yes, so you said that the debt bill is there, just waiting to be approved, which is a great thing. Could you just help us with maybe one or two issues that are in that bill that will not lead us to go back? I'm saying this deliberately because if it is not in the Constitution, it's a question of another executive coming in and with a majority in Parliament and completely doing away with whatever bill is in there. If there's something that can be guaranteed in moving forward as a country, that we are safe, this will not happen again, and that nobody can change issues just at the whim of things. Really, I think, to me, having been in Parliament myself, I do understand and I know that as long as there's something that's not in the Constitution, we'll change this, will start all over again. Thank you.
To be as brief as possible. And I think the questions that have come out, I must say, are very, very important questions, and they need that clarity. So, when we talk of achieving debt sustainability, one of the key tools that we use is the debt sustainability analysis. Now, when you do the debt sustainability analysis, you are going to look at the holistic view of what the economy looks like now and the period over which you are doing the debt sustainability analysis. In this case, we are dealing with 2022, 2023, going into 2026, thereabout. So the debt sustainability that has been done covers the entire IMF program period. So this instrument looks at the revenues, assumptions around all the revenues for the economy, and it also looks at assumptions around expenditures. So it takes the holistic view, as I've earlier indicated, and takes care of the worries that we might have as to you have concentrated on just restructuring and not the revenue aspect. We are looking at the entire framework. So we've done the DSA with the IMF. We've also done the macroeconomic frame with the IMF, which has numbers and various assumptions covering both the expenditure part, the revenue part of the economy over the period of the IMF program, if it comes approved. So in a way, we have taken care, or rather government has taken care of these two interests. In terms of the cap, how do we maintain, how do we ensure that we remain sustainable? The Act, the Public Debt Management Act that has just been assented to but awaiting publication, has placed a cap on contraction of debt. One of the ratios that have been embedded in the Act is the debt to GDP ratio. You will agree with me that the best practice is that for those best performing economies, or for strong economies, it's around 55%. In the bill, or in the Act now, there is 65%. But that 65% debt to GDP is inclusive of both external and domestic debt. So that cap is now provided for in the law, as opposed to the way it was where we did not have that cap. And that is where I thought that 1 and 4 could be combined. I think 2 I've attended to already in terms of scheduling debt leading to debt sustainability is an error if we do not attend to revenues, which is a critical point, but I've indicated that as we do the debt sustainability analysis, we include
the revenue aspect as well as the projected expenditure as well. Why should we not restructure in the context of projects? And I think if you recall, during the panel there was also a point as to ensuring that going forward we should borrow for projects that are able to pay for themselves. I think that was that point that is coming out. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Most of the projects to which this borrowed money went to, most of them are unable to pay for themselves. Of course, we have a few that can pay for themselves. But it's a proposal perhaps that can be considered and can be studied in much more detail to see if certain projects such as the Kazungula, as you have highlighted, could pay for itself in one way or the other. I think it's one point that we can just take note of. The aspect of ZESCO. ZESCO is a big problem. We should not shy away from it. It requires a number of measures in order for it to be solvent. And therefore, when we look at the megawatts that have been added to the existing ability or capacity of ZESCO, it still falls below what ZESCO owes to external lenders especially. So it's a bigger problem. And as we look at debt restructuring, in the context of central government, we have added ZESCO to the entire discussion because we cannot be sustainable as a government, central government, if ZESCO remains unsustainable. So we are looking at ZESCO in the context of the general restructuring with the other creditors as well.
We understand that the country may not really have enough resources to ensure that funding for geological surveys is attained. But we know that the private sector actually can do that. And through a law that can regulate this, we can be able to basically access that information and be able to ensure that this area is expanding. Once we have clear information of our mineral resources and what is basically in terms of quantification, what we expect, it is very easy for us to attract much more investments because I think if we look at what has been happening in the sector, mostly you realize that investments is mainly happening within the already existing companies. But what we need is that we need more new companies coming in to invest in new areas. It is very critical. We can actually look back that from the time new mines were opened up for copper production in Northwestern Province, we realized that we have not had mass investment as compared to that period. And it is quite important that Ministry of Mines is here, that we begin to look at many other areas where we can attract more investments in the mining sector. But not just for copper, but even in other potential minerals like manganese, we see this sector that it has been moving up, but there's still lack of organization, which can actually ensure that a number of even small-scale artisanal miners operating in that aspect. What is it that we can do to ensure that we formalize these people? What sort of incentives can we offer to these people to ensure that they also contribute positively to in terms of paying taxes to this country? Because in this sector, when you look at the small-scale mining, most of them are actually not in compliance when it comes to paying taxes. And the reasons are that they are not well formalized. And so the Ministry of Mines has a big task in terms of ensuring that that aspect is captured and we ensure that learning from other countries like Tanzania, where this has been well taken care of, we can actually ensure that our mining industry contributes positively and sustainably to the economy of this country.
My submission is in the spirit of fast-tracking certain impairments in the sector. I think my colleague was talking about us not really nearing the 3 million metric tons because of how we have started, what sort of basis that we are formulating now. There's a very huge query, and Director, I should be depositing a letter to your office very soon. That is on my table, stemming out of the constituencies we represent as a Chamber of Commerce. And this is an issue that is to do with the snap audits in the mining side, the exploration as well as the small-scale miners. It's been a hot since, I think, March this year, if my conscience does not betray me, March, April. And the people in the sector have not been fully told when this is ending and what prompted that. Yes, we've talked about street surveillance but you see there's quite a lot of things that are coming out of there. We're coming out of COVID-19. This is to do with reforms. We're coming out of COVID-19 where people lost some money, lost time. The small-scale miners borrowed from the banks, and the banks are expecting them to pay back, but due to the losses and non-clearance of the payments, they are suffering losses. So to you, the question is, it will be very nice that the ministry comes out and clears the air, because the small-scale miners are suffering, and there's also losses in terms of tax collections there. There's also losses in jobs. The municipalities within the vicinity where mining is taking place also are losing out. Zema, you mentioned quite a lot of nice things in the presentation there, but for as long as we have impromptu bans, these are inhibitions to even us starting to speak about bumping the production side of things. Lastly, the surveillance side, which might have motivated the halt. One time, 4 years ago, and I was in the capital market, I took time to go and visit the mining sector, and I was trying to ask for the submissions in terms of retains that these mining companies issue. You find that the same listed entities, mines, they issue a 1-page, 2-page document in terms of retains. How sufficient is that for the audit side of things? I think that's another thing that we should look at if we're really going to retain the full value of what is going on in the mining sector. I could go on, but time is not with me. Thank you.
Again, there's a concern that I wish to raise to the Ministry of Mines on the legal framework, especially when it comes to the separation of the surface rights and the ground rights. I did have an opportunity to speak with a few people that have been affected, the surface right holders that get affected by these people that get the exploration licenses. And then the surface right holders are unaware of the sort of mineralization potential that exists in their area. And these mineral right holders, they hold these licenses for longer periods. They're not making any developments. And when these surface right holders want to do exploration in the areas where they are, which they can be able to exploit the minerals, they find that their areas have already been issued out in terms of licensing. And I think that is holding back development of minerals or exploitation of minerals in this country. And I think that the Ministry of Mines needs to really look into that, so that when it comes to issuance of exploration and exploitation licenses, the people that are sitting in those areas must first be given priority to apply for exploration and exploitation licenses within their areas. And if they are not able to, then we can extend it to the rest of the people coming from elsewhere. As long as we're going to have people coming from wherever they are and they have no interest in the development of the area coming, getting these licenses and holding them, we are likely to see very little progress in this sector. Thank you.
The issue of the mining infrastructure proposed after the audit was conducted, I think the Honourable Minister will be getting back to people that to provide guidance, because the issue that came from the audit of what is nature. So I think the Honourable Minister will get to the member of the public coordination as to soon as possible so that the equity is issued. In terms of the surveillance, you're talking about returns for audit. I think we have parameters that our engineers, mining engineers look out for when they are collecting information. So I'm not sure how we can, maybe we need to interact so that we understand what really we are talking about. But there are all lots of KPIs that we look out for in terms of measuring performance of the output of the mining firms as it were. The concern in terms of the legal framework vis-a-vis surface rights and ground rights, so to speak. I think there are two different authorities there. As a Minister of Mines, we anchor the ground rights, so to speak, or mining rights. The issue of surface rights is handled by the Minister of Land. So you find that when we issue the mining exploration license, there's a condition there that if you are sitting on somebody's, if that license is sitting on somebody's land, so to speak, you need to get a consent. So you can't go on a plot of land owned by somebody who surface right and you start digging. It's against the law. You need to have consent. There must be an access agreement so that you agree. If you don't agree, then the ministry can come in and see how they can resolve the matter. But obviously it's important that if there are minerals, we may have to develop it so that when we develop the minerals, I think we are able to get to increase the tax revenue and things like that. But obviously there's that engagement which has to be there. Of course, there are also mining right orders who are speculative in nature, but that's where we come in as a ministry. We may not be very adequate in terms of the institutional arrangement, but when I was making a presentation, I highlighted the fact that going forward, the ministry has identified, obviously working with key stakeholders, you what my brother there was talking about, the inadequacy of the mining bureau, so that going forward, we should be able to strengthen the institutional sector so that the ministry can respond to issues that are taking place on the ground.
I'm just going to give a few notes, a few words about the sustainable options for financing the agriculture sector here in Zambia. And I would like to begin by mentioning just what the moderator mentioned here, that we hear of the song of the social and economic importance of agriculture for a long time. We hear it at the continental level in Africa, at the global level, and also at national level here in Zambia. And so before I go into the financing options, I would like to just, if you look at the slide there, highlight the flow of the presentation this afternoon. I will look at, first of all, the importance of agriculture, the social and economic importance of agriculture. And then I will look at the agricultural financing challenges and how we can unlock those and what options then are available for us to be able to finance agriculture. If you look at the discussion, both in the UN, in the United Nations, and also with other international financial organizations, we talk about the importance of agriculture socially and economically. In Africa, agriculture accounts for 14% of GDP share in agriculture. It is also important for poverty reduction. Agriculture is the major source of income for more than 60% of the people that live in Africa. Agriculture is important also for employment creation because it's also the major source of employment in most African economies. Agriculture is also very important for the economy because all the advanced economies of today began their economic ascent from a successful agricultural transformation. So without us transforming our agriculture sector in a way that creates value and benefits more than 50% of the population, then our economic ascent will not be guaranteed. In fact, most nations go into what we call premature deindustrialization. Why? Because agriculture is the one that provides the raw materials that are required for industry and services. So agriculture is really very important based on that understanding. Now, what are the challenges that we're seeing that are affecting the agriculture sector, even before we come to Zambia, at the continental level in Africa? Number one on the list is inadequate public and private sector financing So the agriculture sector is not receiving the financing it requires for us to be able to exploit the potential that we have in the continent as well as in Zambia as a country. Now, what results from inadequate agricultural financing? We see here that there is low agricultural total factor productivity. There is no efficiency in agriculture in Africa. There is low utilization of technology, given the endowments that we have in terms of arable land as well as available water. We are not utilizing it to the potential because of lack of access to finance. There is limited access to the agriculture support services such as training and extension that are required for us to be able to exploit that potential. And most importantly, because agriculture in Africa and in Zambia included is predominantly smallholder, you find that there's limited knowledge on production in terms of how to cultivate land and how to maximize the yield that is coming from agriculture. And we see it in the output. Total agriculture output is also quite low because of the low investment in agriculture. And so we see a stagnating share in gross domestic product. There is a widening gap between production, agricultural yield, and food demand. In fact, there is now concerns that Africa's agriculture sector may not be able to meet the food demands for the continent. And we also can apply this to our country here in Zambia moving forward. There is this unmet demand for financing in agriculture. In fact, it is now estimated that at Africa level, there is an estimated unmet demand of $80 billion that is required for the smallholder farmers, for the people that are engaged in the agricultural value chains, for them to utilize the full potential of agriculture. And so where should that financing come from? Of course, national governments play a role, but also we have other financial institutions such as banks and IFIs that can help to bridge the gap that I've talked about. On the supply side, we also note that the financial literacy among the smallholder farmers and the people that can engage in agriculture is also quite low. And so it compromises their ability to utilize effectively the finance that they get in terms of investment in agriculture. If you look at the slide that I'm showing now, it shows you the agriculture share in GDP compared to agriculture share in lending. So you find that for most countries, agriculture share in lending is even half, it's not even half the agriculture share in GDP. And so that's quite a challenge in terms of looking at how underfunded the agriculture sector is in most of the African countries. When we come to Zambia, some of the key facts also to mention is that the agriculture sector mirrors the continental picture. We know that agriculture in Zambia is predominantly smallholder. They produce more than 80% of the produce across almost all the value chains. And we've noted that there has been a reduction in agriculture share in GDP in Zambia over the past 10 years. For example, in 2010, agriculture share in GDP was 15.6%. And this has now dropped to 2.7% in 2020. And you can see that the drop in the share of agriculture in GDP is signifying that there is low efficiency in agriculture. Remember, we mentioned that more than 60% of Zambians depend on agriculture as the major source of income and employment. And so if agriculture is not efficient, it means then that the welfare of more than half of Zambia's population is also not guaranteed. We have noted also here that the share in employment has also dropped in agriculture. And we've noted that in 2005, it was at 72.6%, and this is now at 49.64% in 2019. It shows you also that agriculture is becoming less and less important to Zambia's economic agenda, which is contrary to what we hear in all the policy documents in terms of putting agriculture at the center of Zambia's social and economic development. In terms of budget allocation, and I'm happy that we have colleagues from IAPI that are going to also maybe share their thoughts about this particular point. In terms of budget allocation to agriculture, given its social and economic importance, we note here that there has been a reduction as well. If you look at the year 2011, it was 6.7% of the total national budget allocated to agriculture. By the year 2021, this has dropped to 4.7%. And this is not in line with the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program under the Maputo Declaration that Zambia signed up to to ensure that they can invest 10% of their national budget into agriculture. Now, I want to talk about what are some of the preconditions. What do we need to put in place to enable agriculture finance to work, to enable investors who are not based here to invest in agriculture, to also prepare the local people who are involved in agriculture to benefit from the financing options that are available to the smallholder farmers. Three important things that need to be looked at. The first one is that we need to have favorable policy and institutional framework. That is one. And for Zambia, we have the National Agriculture Policy, the National Agriculture Investment Plan that is currently being drafted for the coming 4 years. And then we have the 8 NDP and then the Vision 2030. So this one provides the framework. And if you look at the articles of the documents in Zambia, they do provide clear targets in terms of where we need to go. So that's important, because then we establish how much then do we need for us to be able to meet the targets that we've put in our documents. This is quite important. The other thing that we need to look at is that agriculture is considered to be a risky business. And so as a nation, we need to put in blended credit guarantee and insurance products. We need to de-risk agriculture by making sure that we have a national insurance attached to agriculture input supply, and we also are using credit guarantee options to be able to ensure that people can go into the agriculture sector moving forward. The third point is improved agriculture efficiency. If we're talking about investing in a sector like agriculture, which is considered risky, we also need to guarantee that we get a return on the investment. Let me end by just making my recommendations. The first one is that we need to increase investment in agriculture, ensure the 10% minimum allocation. We need to prioritize the implementation of existing policy frameworks in Zambia, like I highlighted, to bridge the gap between policy provisions and implementation. We need to create blended finance models through PPP arrangements, and then Zambia should continue providing medium to high scale businesses in order to invest or attract external borrowers. And then finally, we need to intensify efforts to promote agriculture insurance and targeted credit guarantee schemes that can help to improve the competitiveness of agriculture in Zambia. Thank you.
My name again is Charles Kawai from the Agricultural Policy Research Institute, and thank you very much for that excellent presentation. You gave a very clear picture of what's obtaining at continental level, and then you came down to the country level. I feel extremely embarrassed to be still talking about agriculture development in this country. I've been talking about it from days I was a small boy, and this country has produced. He was actually my student. I've taught at the university, but outside, Zambia has very qualified technical people, both at university level, college level, institute level, farmer level. The whole Ministry of Agriculture, highly qualified. But why has the issue of agriculture development eluded us all this time? Are we really ready to change? Are we really ready to just transform, as the President put it, we're in the period of agricultural transformation? Are we really going to do that? Did Kaunda talk about agricultural transformation? It is. Did we have institutions like POS, Lima Bank, and all these institutions to address issues of finance? Yes, we did. I think as Zambia, we really have to understand that Zambian agriculture is dualistic. It's in two parts. The first part, which is the most difficult part, is the small-scale farmers. These are people who are farming not as a business. They are on, just because they're on land, they assume they are business people, they are farmers as a business. They are not. We really have to understand that. So how much we may give them, farmer input support program, be it direct support, be it e-voucher, what have you, I can assure you, moderator, this is not going to change as long as they continue funding us as not a business. It's social for them, because I'm on land, I can grow a few things. And I can assure you this year, when Madam Moderator, the bag of fertilizer is 1,000 kwacha. Already that's the range where a bag of fertilizer is. And per hectare, you need 4 units, 8 bags. So that's 8,000 kwacha. The kind of productivity I was talking about.
Because
sorry, I thought somebody was. Yes, so I was saying, Madam Moderator, that with the kind of productivity I was talking about, under 2 tons per hectare, it's a waste of fertilizer because they will not break even. They will make losses. There are those who are going to buy the fertilizer as such before seed and so on. Then a bag of maize goes at 150, 180 a bag, and you're producing less than 40 bags, you cannot break even. So we really need to think through this very seriously. He did indicate and described this small-scale farmer very well. He cannot use technology, new technology. Some of them are still recycling seed. They cannot take advantage of hybrid seed that will give you 10 tons per year. They have no collateral, therefore they cannot borrow from the bank. They can't do any bankable document, they know nothing about such things. And yet it's the area that we are putting all our attention. Billions and billions of dollars. The Food Reserve Agency that I was privileged to have been the first chief executive, every year is billions of dollars that are going to that institution. But what we are producing in terms per household is going lower and lower. It is ironic that at this stage, agriculture that every president talked about is contributing to us going to 4-point-something, percent to GDP. And yet, the majority of people are living on land. Something is seriously wrong. And the issue of financial support to agriculture will not be addressed if we don't address the environment preconditions around those small-scale farmers. Now, coming to the emergent commercial farmers, those are the ones who react to any incentive. The insurance you are talking about, they will take advantage. In fact, to the point that as a country, we have ignored them because they know how to take care of themselves. They go to the banks and argue and get loans at very low interest. Some of them are even borrowing from outside the country. So one should be saying, for this agricultural transformation, shouldn't we start dissecting this small-scale farmer? This lumping all of them has not helped us. Maybe we should start saying, okay, in each district, can we identify 20-30 good small-scale farmers who really we can prop them up and they become proper commercial farmers. It will probably help us. I think at this point in time, in short term, if we want it to become a strong nation agriculture-wise, maybe we should put conditions more conducive for our commercial farmers. This idea of having export bans, they cannot export. These are people who can produce even wheat at 8 tons per hectare. They can produce maize at 14 tons per hectare. How can we facilitate this as we are bringing up now the small-scale farmers? Some farmers in the villages, they're just carpenters, they're just priests, just go to church and ends up, they're not commercial farmers. So we are, to tell the truth, countrymen, who are putting money where you're not supposed to. We should be able to identify who really is a farmer that can do farming as a business. Thank you.
My name is Frank Kayula, and I'm representing the National Association for Smallholder Farmers. I'm saying that we are sitting here to discuss what we can do to transform agriculture. And I'm likely to make conclusions that we are not going to do it. While I saw those in the Ministry of Mines here, I'm not yet heard in the introduction anybody coming from the Ministry of Agriculture. Anybody here? from the Ministry of Agriculture so that they help us also to answer the way the Ministry of Mines were answering some of the questions to show the direction that the government has. Anybody here? So it will be a talk show. Other than that, I want to say that ZNFU also should have been here to talk very strongly about the large-scale farmers. Fortunately, there is a way that has been given. In fact, as a matter of fact, if we have to move the agricultural sector in Zambia, we need to be serious. That's number one. I will not talk much, but to say what my colleague presented was very good, Dr. Kapote, and what my former lecturer did present, Honorable Chance Kabaye, speaks to what we need to do. Let me just give you experience of how we have answered it ourselves as a national association for smallholder farmers. Probably somebody seated here will pick it up and see how they can enhance that, scale it up, and improve the welfare of agriculture in Zambia. And I agree that as long as we take it as a way of life, it is not going to help the economy of this country. The fact is, and it stands, that agriculture, when it grows the economy. And yet we have sat here, we have had better views from the mining sector, how the mining sector will contribute, and it will give you 2% of people employed. And I had a question, Madam, you didn't just allow me to speak. I wanted to ask also how the 3 million metric tons will benefit the Zambians. Who will be the real beneficiary of the 3 million metric tons? Is it the foreign direct investors as we know in the past? Or is it the common Zambian there? So that we take whatever we get from the 3 million tons, reinvest it in our agricultural sector. Because, by the way, it's the only sector that will help us to grow. We heard what Dr. Kapoto said, everywhere in the world, they have used the agricultural sector to grow to where they are. For the association, what we have done so far is that we have said, well, people will continue talking, let's act, maybe we'll make a difference. And what we have done is to go to the private sector, because we believe in 4 P's: public, private, people, partnerships. And people here, we have organizations representing the people. And so we have gone to the private sector and they have said, private sector, you have fertilizer to offer to the smallholder farmer. You also have seed to offer. And you also provide the market for the smallholder farmers. Can we sit down and discuss? And we request for the prices to get a little lower so that they still make their profit. And then we request that, can you allow our farmers to pay you 50% upfront? And then you allow your commodity to go to the smallholder farmers. Then the remaining 50%, the farmers and the organization will ensure that it is insured with the insurance companies that are existing in Zambia. And it will be paid after the farmer has harvested. I can assure you it is working well. But it still needs support. I'm responding to how are we going to finance the agricultural sector. PPPs are very helpful. Because we cannot leave many things in the hands of government, which, as we had on debt restructuring, they have a lot of debt, and they have also included another lot of people that they are going to pay, almost 40,000 new recruits. So for them to be the only ones engaging in supporting smallholder farmers, even large-scale farmers, it is hard. So let's take advantage of the PPPs, because the private sector wants the commodities that the farmers are producing. And so they can finance some of them, like they have done already. They have financed. They did finance soybeans and maize last season through our organization, and now they are just buying that and getting the money, the 50% that we made. That is working. But what it requires is scaling up and also enhancing on some of the features. For me, I would say, since we are hungry, you can hear from the voice that we are hungry. It's almost past 18 hours. I'll end there. Thank you.
you have been in forums where he's passionately talked about the agri side of things. If we probe our 7th National Development Plan, now the 8th currently undergoing wordsmithing before it's launched, you still find that there are elements that are speaking to economic diversification. And the closer we are getting to is agriculture. Now the agriculture side of things, there is the factorization, the mechanization, all the capacity things that the doc highlighted there. So the question that goes to you, Honorable, is, we know, yes, some have taken it as a side hustle, and I'm using the side hustle because it's a buzzword now, entrepreneurship, we say side hustle, agriculture side hustle. Doc, now from a lawmaker to a first CEO of a big agri department in the country in the name of FIA, an expert farmer yourself, where is the problem when we know that we need to divide between those that are mainstream in agriculture and those that are just playing the sector itself? Where is the problem? Is it the political will or the mindset problem? I submit.
So what the previous speakers mentioned, what we're doing wrong. For me, actually, because most of the incentives that we put in the agriculture sector are actually politicized. So if we do depoliticize some of these things, we'll actually see the major benefits of what will come out of the agriculture sector. For example, we've seen that much of the budget allocation towards agriculture also goes to the Farmers Input Support Program. But we've seen that we still are experiencing low yields and we're not actually attaining our intended objectives of that. So as we are seeking to have economic transformation, one of the things that we can look at is actually see what other sectors we can focus our allocations to. For example, we look at research and development, which is underfunded. There is currently a project that's being piloted, or that was piloted in Eastern Province to look at location-specific fertilizer, which will also help to improve on our yields. So other than us focusing on sectors that are not yielding, why don't we channel search towards productive sectors? And also when we're looking at our extension programs here in Zambia, most of them are actually productive oriented, where our extension workers just look at sharing ways in which we can improve productivity. But they don't share ways in which we can also improve on marketing as well as access to markets for the farmers. So maybe if we put in place a market-oriented extension sector, we'd actually see more people see the benefits of agriculture being commercialized as opposed to just being a social undertaking. Thank you.
I think that agriculture is one of those sectors that have been stagnant, and we see a drop in the addition of agriculture to GDP from 15 to 2%. It's quite disappointing, firstly, I must say that if we're looking at issues of financing, we're still talking about encouraging farmers to borrow instead of us advising them to reinvest, even as we look at issues of financing. So I think issues of reinvestments, even for small-scale farmers, should be of vital importance, so that we have them reducing the risk of borrowing and them being able to manage the business well. Even as we look at restructuring debts as a country, it should start from a typical, an individual in a community, and this individual in this case is a farmer. Also, we should look at issues of investment appraisal. I think even in the mining sector, this is an issue that we are lacking, and we are ignoring the issue of management. So we should look at investment appraisal and value addition, and also issues of catalyst financing. What do I mean by this? We see reports being made about how tomatoes are being wasted because of high supply. So if we could look at issues of value addition, for example, making tomato paste and providing financing for such, especially under the ministry, so that we see that our local farmers also invest in areas such as value addition, especially that our machinery is expensive. Thank you.
We need to adjust it, and this is a recommendation. We understand that FISIP is a subsidy, and if FISIP is a subsidy, don't expect much, because it is a safety net for the poor. Much as we want them to upgrade, But then I think what we're proposing is that we should have a continuum of other stages where you have the micro and small in the FISIC program. But those that have capability can be in another cluster, which could be now financed by government through targeting. I think I got a picture from Honorable there. Targeting individual Zambians that will be well appraised through proper credit scoring systems that will ensure they do not even default. And at that time would have removed the politics in that. And we create a revolving fund that in the future, when they start paying back, those resources will start circulating amongst themselves. And then you move to the other cluster, which will be the large scale. So government can be intentional. We are not saying they can finance everyone, but target your Zambians, frank them, even if we take 2 per year. But what is important is that we are adding to the list of Zambians that are actually taking charge in the agricultural sector. Then that will be a comprehensive input support program. Thank you.
I think let me start by responding to 2 pointed questions. There was one from my brother from Chamber of Commerce, down there. He was.
And where have we gone wrong? Yes.
Exactly, yeah. So and what should we do? Really, where we've gone wrong is that our investment has not been a targeted investment. Even the benchmarks that we've agreed locally and also at international level, he talked about Maputo Declaration or Malawi Declaration. All these were done by the AU presidents that we should be putting 10% of our GDP to agriculture, and there should be quality distribution of that 10%. That has not been achieved. In fact, it has been going down and also wrongly positioned. Really, to me, agriculture should be targeted. We should be seeing money going to research and development, money going into extension, money going into the rural roads. You can imagine if it's just a quarter of the investment that we put in Lusaka went into the rural roads, this country and agriculture would have jumped significantly. So really, we've not been targeting, properly. Under climate change today, moderator, we need smart agriculture. We need proper irrigation all over the country. We should not only be producing 1 crop, we should be producing 2-3 crops in a year on the same piece of land. We need transparent and predictable policies. People should know you are going to agriculture and these are the policies, not changing midstream. We've closed the border, you cannot export. I think we need very transparent and predictable policies to be in place. Regarding my brother at the end, a comprehensive input, fantastic thought. Excellent. To me, that, in fact, you have a position in IAP in our agricultural research institute. Those are the kind of brains we need. Yes, we really need, in Malawi, in Tanzania, and in Kenya, they only give 2 bags of fertilizer. 1 D, 1 urea. And that's for household food security. It's not for commerce, not for commercial. In Zambia, we give 8 bags. That's why we see a lot of it being sold in the streets. All over you see, as we give them, fertilizer and seed in the next month or so, it will be sold all over. We should identify, we'll give it 2 bags for household food security. But those we think are better are the one put at 8 bags or even more. And over the time, 5 years' time, we have developed a proper commercial team, not only white farmers, but indigenous Zambian commercial farmers. To me, that's the way to go. And I really applaud that contribution and thank you for the question.
Well, what wrong is that we don't know where we are. We have been unable to define our own smallholder farmer for quite a long time. For me, I believe we have commercial farmers, we have smallholder farmers, and traditional farmers. We don't have all those other groups that we talk about. When we know where we are, then we can say, what direction should we take? I'm now in Kawa and I want to go to Lusaka. What direction should I take? We need to know for a fact what is causing the contribution of agriculture to GDP to be where it is now. There is a fallacy that I would like each one of us to go and research, that the contribution to GDP from agriculture must never be as high as we think. Never. You look at GDP contribution by all the advanced economies, you find that it's less than 5%. Why should we be targeting 20%, for example? The reason is simple. Where GDP from agriculture is less than 5%, it's because they have advanced into the agribusiness. They start processing. They start adding value to what they are producing. As long as we target a higher percentage of GDP contribution from agriculture, it is the wrong formula. The right formula is that we need to start adding value. I applaud what my sister there, my young daughter said. We need to ensure that we start adding value. If we don't add value, trouble. Let me say something else on the physics that is going on now. Farmers contribute 400 kwacha. And that 400 kwacha is split into 100 kwacha for insurance, 300 kwacha for fertilizer and seed. Essentially, the smallholder farmers are buying that fertilizer at 50 kwacha. And government is putting the 6,700 kwacha, which does not add value because when the farmers produce, productivity is extremely low. 33 bags per hectare against what they can produce, the potential of 260 bags per hectare. There is a lot of things that are wrong in the agricultural sector that we need to address other than just pumping in fertilizer this year, fertilizer that year. We need to sit down and say, where are we? This is where we are in terms of productivity. This is where we are in terms of commercializing the agricultural sector. How do we move from here of agriculture contributing so much to GDP? And by the way, the 2% that was mentioned earlier, our contribution which has gone down. It's not that we have added value to our agricultural products. No. It's the failures that we have in the agricultural sector which we need to address. For me, this topic is big. I decided that I should come here against the 3 meetings that I was called to today, same time. I was supposed to be the Minister of Finance, I was supposed to be with Minister of Fisheries and Livestock, I was supposed to be with the SCF meeting. But I thought what you coined here is very important because once we transform the agricultural sector, then we are done as a nation. But as long as we keep on talking, and we don't know where we are, we will remain with challenges. Let's find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Samuel. I am serving as Assistant Director in the Research and Corporate Strategy Department at the Zambia Revenue Authority. In terms of an outline of this discussion, I just want to touch very briefly on some of the key points around this topic. It's a very broad topic, very interesting, and one that is at the heart of a serious concept of economic development. And so I want to make an argument for domestic resource utilization. Why should we talk about it? And then also, I want to present an analysis of Zambia's revenue sources over time. And then we also want to discuss some of the strategies that we have implemented. And because I'm coming from ZRA, I will be saying ZRA a lot. So some of the strategies that we have implemented to enhance domestic resource utilization. And then I'll try and present a nexus between domestic resource mobilization and the illicit financial flows, or IFFs. And then, as I do that, I'll try and discuss what illicit financial flows are. I know we are coming from a diverse range of backgrounds. We may take it for granted that we know what it is, so I just want to define what illicit financial flows are. And then contextualize the problem. How is this a problem, and why should we be talking about it in a discussion such as this that is talking about the economic transformation, achieving economic transformation for our countries. Then I'll try and explain the link between tax evasion and the fight against financial crimes. Then I also try to talk about the consequences of tax evasion in order for me to impress upon the audience why we should care about this topic. And then some of the common practices that we have seen from an administrative point of view. And then we also discuss the strategies that ZRA is employing now to fight tax evasion and financial crimes before we conclude with arguments around how we go forward. I'll start with a slight digression, just trying to define what economic development is. This is not a new way. This is not a new way, or this is not a new concept. But we have seen a lot of emphasis in the recent literature that is defining development as the enlargement of the range of people's choices. Another one that I like is the one by Strin et al., which was done in 1981, where they are saying that development, the objective of development is to provide all human beings with the opportunity for a full life. Then I want to also move on to the fact that the definition of development, economic development, is really about policies and programs or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and the quality of life for a community. So why am I talking about economic development as we discuss domestic resource mobilization? This is mainly because this is the aspiration that countries such as ourselves find ourselves in. We want to make sure that we improve the range of choices for our people. Choice is a very important matter. And in November they say, what's the of food? Isn't it? You only choose from where there is a lot of options. So when you have options, then people can have choices. But when you don't have options, you can't choose. And then this is why domestic resource mobilization sits at the heart of this conversation. If you think about the discussions that have come about, it's about finding the necessary resources that are going to fund and finance development objectives. So as we make an argument for domestic resource mobilization, we are trying to say that this is the process of just generating revenue from domestic sources towards the objective of sustainable development finance. So how do we finance the development that we want to see in the country? There are several options that are available, and right now, in much of the literature, we find that domestic resource mobilization has moved to the forefront of the development agenda among the development economists, internationally and locally. We are aware that recently the Ministry of Finance released the medium term expenditure framework, and the third objective of the MTF, in terms of the macroeconomic objectives, places an emphasis on enhancing domestic resource mobilization. So broadening and deepening the tax base can help countries avoid dependence on official development assistance and foreign borrowers. And it can also serve as a catalyst for broader improvements in government accountability, responsiveness, and institutional capacity. Increasing tax revenues, therefore, for countries such as Zambia, generally, by broadening the domestic tax base, improving tax compliance, curbing tax evasion, is therefore critical to ending extreme poverty and ensuring that we have a shared prosperity. Now, it's important from the literature what we see is that countries that fail to generate resources domestically, and by this as a proxy of measurement, we refer to the tax to GDP ratio. When the tax to GDP ratio is below 15%, we have found that generally economies struggle to fund the basic state functions. So this is why it's important for us to discuss domestic resource mobilization. We'll focus a little bit of the discussion, the next set of the discussion, on why taxes are important to development economies. And this is because for us to achieve the development ambitions of the country, of the government, we need to raise domestic resources to finance this expenditure. And the best way to do it is through taxation. Taxation is simply a process by which governments raise revenue to enable them to provide public goods and services for the welfare of citizens. And in the medium term, we see, if you look through the document I just referred to earlier, government aims to raise domestic resources in Zambia to about 22.4% of GDP, with the tax revenue accounting for about 21% of GDP in that 22.4%. So you can see it's quite a huge emphasis that has been placed on this. And the key pillars in enhancing domestic resource mobilization include increasing tax compliance for all potential taxpayers through enhanced tax administration, taxpayer education, and the realization of efficiency gains through the enhanced use of technology in tax administration, monitoring, and enforcement of activities. Now, briefly, when you look at the sources of government revenue, there are mainly four sources of government revenue domestically. Well, not domestically. So taxes of various types. We have income taxes, indirect taxes, direct taxes, indirect taxes, fees and fines, customs duties, etc. And then we also have non-tax revenues made up of fees, fines, and other charges. When we get speeding tickets, that is revenue for the government. The government can also borrow from local and international lenders, and also they can rely on grants and international cooperation. Now you can see that the last two, especially the third one, presents a problem. Presents a problem because we have a growing debt situation, and it requires that we pay back and look for resources to do that. So it's already a constraint. Grants and international cooperation, you are relying on the goodwill of people outside of your home. So you cannot plan, you cannot program development on the basis of grants and international cooperation, which is why the emphasis of taxes comes to the fore. If you look at our current scenario, government has over the past 5 to 10 years received revenue from taxes, which has accounted for about 70% of the total government budget, roughly around there, 60 to 70%. And I demonstrate through a graph in the next slide. You see that the trend of tax revenue to GDP ratio has been slightly above 50%. And remember, in the earlier arguments I presented to this floor that if you are below or around this 15% target, you are basically failing to run as a country. And in 2022, Parliament has set the target for revenue collection at about 91 billion, which is 19.5% of the projected. So we have quite a gap in order to be where we are in order to finance development. Now, in the interest of time, I may skip a few points that are here, and I'll just go straight into some of the strategies which the authority has implemented to enhance domestic resource mobilization. So some of the things basically involve around, number one, establishment of the Inspectorate and Customs Enforcement Unit, which is mandated to conduct enforcement activities for both domestic and customs services. So it's about enhancement of compliance, making sure that every person who is liable to pay or from whom we should collect, we are collecting that revenue. No one should be left behind outside of the net. So therefore, we have rolled out electronic system prices, which try to automate and substitute the need for a physical inspector to be standing behind the till to monitor what is happening to enhance compliance. Another issue is the implementation of systems and payment platforms such as tax on phone, which enable tax registration, the filing of returns, the payment of taxes on phone without internet connectivity. This is to enhance and reduce the opportunity for evasion. We've also appointed withholding tax agents for base tax, for withholding tax, for VAT, rental incomes, in order to improve compliance. Another initiative has been to implement centralized processing centers which operate on a 24/7 basis, leading to a quicker document processing and reduction in dwell time and orders. Then we've also set up taxpayer service centers all across the country in various busy places, malls, East Park here, Ministry of Agriculture, Cosmopolitan, etc., where we try to make our presence visible and accessible. Then we've also tried to use is that where you fail to see what is happening in the complexity of informality and tax fraud, which are the main limitations to domestic resource mobilization that I was just presenting in the previous slide, lies the area of illicit financial flows. So the green or is the blue area is the illicit financial transactions, and then what's written as yellow in your slide is the informality and the nexus between domestic resource mobilization and cross-border transactions. So IFFs address cross-border transactions of an illicit nature, for instance, tax evasion and crime, as well as illicit activities that are in themselves domestic in nature but involve domestic financial, cross-border financial flows. So this is the kind of link that happens. So while someone is trying to hide resources so that they can evade taxes, they are engaging, or the fertile ground for illicit financial flows creates a disability for us to enhance the capacity of domestic resources to be generated domestically. Therefore, DRIMs and IFFs both have the ability to constrain public resources available for public investment and service delivery, resulting in the need to, one, identify the internal synergies on the areas of over, particularly tax evasion, and then recognize the practical boundaries between these topics. Now, just in terms of definition, what is this illicit financial flows that we keep talking about? Illicit financial flows are defined as involving the transfer of financial resources earned through illegal activities such as corruption, transactions involving contraband goods, criminal activities, and efforts aimed at sheltering wealth from the tax administration. So the idea is to hide, either in plain sight or under a law. And then we are saying they therefore have a cumulative effect of facilitating cross-border movements of monies that are illegally obtained or otherwise. And then the report on the high-level panel of illicit financial flows defines IFFs as money that is illegal. It is illegally earned, transferred, or utilized, originating from three main sources. Number one, commercial tax evasion, which involves criminal activities and theft by corrupt government officials. Number two, we have commercial tax, basically, no, we're still number one. Commercial tax evasion also includes trade misinvoicing, abusive transfer pricing, while criminal activities include drug trade, human trafficking, and the smuggling of contraband goods. So IFFs can occur deliberately through criminal behavior or through complex avoidance schemes. So number one, in terms of how they occur, is the abusive transfer pricing through multinational corporations or entities that employ multiple and often complex structures to shift profits from the normal tax rate jurisdictions to low or no tax jurisdictions. This is the major source of IFFs in Zambia. And then we also have misinvoicing. And then we also have unequal contracts that present an opaque or secret arrangement between contracting parties relating to resource extraction and resource countries. Then we also have excessive interest payments. This also presents an equal, a way in which illicit financial flows exist. So while illicit financial inflows to developing countries also exist, the net effect of outflows and inflows shows developing regions at the negative end of the pole, being the environment of greater extraction and exploitation. So we see that the tail end of this. And I'll skip this a little bit and just talk about the extent, context of the problem of illicit financial flows. I know moderator is standing there. Try and wrap up within 5 minutes if you allow. Yeah, thank you. And so if you look at the context of the problem of illicit financial flows in Africa, you find that the ANATAF report estimates that between 1970 and 2008, around 854 billion watched, and almost 1 trillion over the past 50 years have been lost in illicit financial flows. These numbers being considerably higher than direct inflows in aid and foreign direct investment into the country, into the continent. So, the United Nations addressed this point when it shows that estimates of illicit financial flows out of Africa surpass the global foreign direct investment received by the continent. In 2017, Oxfam projected that about 56% of IFFs living in Africa between 2000 and 2010 emanated from oil, metals, ores, and precious mineral sectors. That's basically where we have fallen, especially on the latter category. This view is also supported by the European Commission, which estimates that extractive companies are responsible for about 65% of the revenue loss in Africa. Now, it is argued that if the continent is able to exercise greater control over illicit financial flows, the reinvestment of capital outflows would reduce the headcount poverty ratio for the continent by a further 4 to 6%, virtually halving extreme poverty in 2 years' time from where we stand. So this is quite a big problem. And there's a table on page 27 of the slide, which is just giving a snapshot of the countries that have recorded some form of illicit financial transactions between the periods that are stated. In the interest of time, I'll skip through these figures, but you can see it's not just the Zambian problem. Countries such as Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, Angola, Tanzania, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have recorded significant billions, or not of kwacha, but of US dollars, to illicit financial flows. So, in terms of the situation analysis in Zambia, we find that the FIG report that was released, if you remember, in July 2017, it was quite some controversy and steer. The Zambia Financial Intelligence Center reported that multinational mining companies were getting away with an estimated $3 billion annually through tax evasion and illicit financial flows. This is despite various tax reforms to boost the decline in tax to GDP ratio in Zambia. And what we are seeing is that we have been averaging around 17% of tax to GDP ratio, while countries in the sub-Saharan region are significantly above that. There's a study that was done by Zipa, who documented that about 67% of their surveyed respondents had little to no knowledge about taxes and the tax systems that are in Zambia. This is quite a significant problem. And therefore, there's a growing global integration that has resulted in increased tax avoidance among transnational corporations, and it is LTCs who often bear the disproportionate cost of this. Particularly, innovations have increased the potential risk concerns regarding offshore tax evasion, where funds are being disposed and sheltered from home tax authorities and having potential connections with illicit financial flows. I'll skip this and just maybe, if you could take me to slide number 36. On page 36, we are talking about the consequences of tax evasion. Why should we care? Tax evasion imposes different tax burdens on taxpayers. Underlying or defying one of the principal elements of the canons of taxation. Ideally, everyone should pay a fair tax, but because some people have got access to sophisticated machinery, it creates an unequal footing of the tax burden. It promotes inefficient allocation of resources, evasion creates unfair competition, and imposes an extra cost to tax authorities. It has serious effects on the fiscal space by distorting both the horizontal and vertical equity, as effective tax rates are reduced, that individuals face differ because of the different opportunities for tax evasion. And therefore, it reduces the taxable capacity of the country. Some of the common practices in Zambia of tax evasion include inflation of cost elements, procurement. I think we've experienced this even in our organization. Something that you can buy, even a bar of salt, or a bar of soap, sorry, at the 12 kwacha and ShopRite. If it's invoiced to an organization, it comes at a huge cost. Overpricing of loans and exchange interests, not using fiscal devices or cash registers. We have large cash transactions, transfer mispricing through the use of avenues such as management and consultancy fees, profit shifting through existing loopholes due to differential income tax rates. Some organizations opt to declare losses in specific sectors and declare profits in those sectors that have lower taxes, such as manufacturing and agriculture. We've seen this, there are reports about it. The use of tax havens. These are some of the things that have been happening. And in addressing some of these issues in Zambia, we have not sat back. As said earlier, we have tried to bring the fight to the perpetrators. And as you can see from there, these are the number of investigations that have been conducted by the authority, showing that there's a higher emphasis and a higher focus on fighting the precedents of tax evasion and tax erosion. We have further set up enforcement units who are executing anti-smuggling activities, and you can see the number of interceptions and the values. They have been growing quite proportionately from around 2013 to about 2021 when these statistics were generated. We've also set up specialized transfer pricing units because this is a complex problem. It requires a different way of looking at it. Since 2012, we've been building capacity for transfer pricing audits, and a number of officers have been trained and have been sent and exposed to different countries such as Malaysia, Netherlands, France, South Africa to learn about how best to deal with issues of tax evasion. Then we've also partnered with organizations such as the OECD, the UN, the African Tax Administration Forum, IBFT, to offer training with dealing with multinationals and international taxation in general, which covers transfer pricing. We also have set up a forensic lab at the Zambia Revenue Authority, and then we also have made a mandatory TP requirement and fiscalization. Now going forward, lastly, the whole of government approach to combat money laundering and other financial crimes, as advocated by OECD, needs to be embraced, recognizing that knowledge and skill required to effectively fight these offenses are often spread across different bodies, such as tax administrations, financial intelligence units, the specialized criminal law enforcement authorities, financial regulators, and the public prosecutor's office. So what we are calling for is a collective effort. If we are acting in isolation, we are not going to get ahead in this particular fight. The whole of government approach does not imply ordering the fact that financial intelligence units' primary function is to tackle money laundering and that of tax evasions to ensure tax compliance. It simply acknowledges that by working closely together, all of the bodies will be better positioned to achieve their objective. We need domestic legal framework to permit suspicious transaction reports to be used at the tax administration level, not only for identifying crimes, but for civil purposes in connection with tax compliance. Furthermore, we are saying a unitary taxation system is needed to remove incentives for transnational corporations to shift their burdens towards more favorable tax regimes. This system would mean that instead of related companies being treated as separate tax entities, they would be treated as a single unit on their consolidated accounts. Lastly, We are saying improving the exchange of information between countries is critical to ensuring that no lost taxation occurs through double non-taxation. Currently, bilateral tax treaties are used to provide other states with information concerning taxable revenue. Through such agreements, although such agreements should be multilateral in scope. And in the final analysis, given the more global nature of the markets and business operations, we need political support to be coordinated across countries to ensure that tax regimes are unified. This concept of the rest to the middle, it should be the rest to the middle and not the rest to the bottom. We should not be competing on who can offer the lowest tax incentives. This is what has created this problem in the first place. Important tax issues on double taxation, information sharing and enforcement, the offshore financial centers and effective regional tax rules all require a level of enhanced global and regional cooperation. Additionally, we need to evaluate our mechanisms for cooperation on a recurring basis. This evaluation should be informed by the experience of officers directly involved in cooperation, as well as objective assessment of the results of interagency cooperation approach, which we are currently implementing.
How illicit financial flows affect domestic resource mobilization. And as my colleague from ZRA had mentioned, you find that domestic resource mobilization in itself should be at the heart of economic development. But then we find that as a country, even before we're speaking of maybe expanding our tax base, we have to be looking at how best we can ensure that we work with the current tax base, ensure that there's efficiency in how even revenues are being collected, to ensure that whatever loopholes are in existence within our tax systems are dealt with. And one of the things that really come out is that tax evasion is a growing problem to date. We find that even from the trends report that was recently published, tax evasion increased to about 722 million in 2021 compared to 2020 when it was around 717 million. This is a growing issue, and tax evasion in itself, as earlier alluded to, negatively does affect the economy as it siphons away money that could be used for productive sectors, and also in terms of economic diversification and addressing our social problems. We find that even when we look at the national budget, most of our social sectors are still struggling. In as much as in the 2022 national budget, we saw some increments in terms of the values of what government had allocated to education, health, and social protection. But in terms of the percentages, they're still very minimal. And with our growing debt problem, which currently we're also looking for measures in how best we can deal with our debt problem, it becomes very much cardinal for us to ensure that whatever resources that are being generated within the country are being served for our own development and also for our people to reduce poverty and inequality. And also when we look at issues of double taxation agreements, we find that as a country, for the longest time, we have been found in situations where most of these tax treaties do not favor us as a country. I came across one case where Zambia had signed an agreement with Mauritius. And within this agreement, this was signed in about January 2011 and only came into effect in 2012. However, this kind of treaty only ensured that residents within Mauritius could benefit in terms of the dividends and interest payments that were coming from whatever resources between the two countries. And in 2020, this deal was actually terminated by the ministries in charge. But when you look at the period of which this treatment was somewhat being implemented, we find that a lot of resources between 2011 and 2020 have been lost. And so even moving forward as a country, we should do better in terms of the kind of agreements that we are doing with with other countries that are more beneficial for our own people and for our own development. Illicit financial flows, as earlier alluded to, continue to be a problem to date. He had mentioned that between 2001 and 2010, we did lose about $8.8 billion. That is a lot of money. And most of these resources that we're actually losing to such vices could help to even stimulate our economic growth further as a country. In as much as we always seek to external parties to maybe help us in terms of financing our budget deficits, when we're able to ensure that we realign our economy to a point where we can benefit from most of our sectors, especially the mining sector where we have a lot of multinational enterprises, we will be able to channel most of these funds to most of our sectors that are in dire need of development. So social sectors, for example. So in as much as we are having this conversation, I think the bigger issue should be how can we realign our economy to ensure that whatever resources are coming in are being channeled to the right sectors that need development. Because even after COVID-19, a lot of people actually even went back to poverty. So many economic hardships have been experienced over time. And so, as we speak of domestic resource mobilization, we should ensure that whatever measures are being put in place are beneficial for our own people. Issues of beneficial ownership also become very cardinal, because when we are ensuring that most of the contracts that are being put in place, there are no hidden agendas or corruption going on, we'll be able to benefit more. So the key issue is for us to ensure that we can all as Zambians be part of this discussion to ensure that we are at a better trajectory in terms of development. Thank you.
Listening to the presenter, the second speaker, I think you will all agree with me that it takes a lot of spine to really fight the bone of contention to the domestic resource mobilization. Now, allow me to attack this twofold. I think he gave us quite a very illustrative presentation that is obviously interpreted, sorry. And then let me attack the topic in two folds. One, I want to speak about the root cause. Two, maybe a recommendation. We somehow have loosely looked at illicit flows, financial illicit flows, as an external activity. Not really knocking our heads and understanding that we, the locals here, private sector and government, we are the supply side of IFFS. We are the supply side. Why am I saying that? Let me start probably with the root cause. If you're going to look at the taxation echelon in the country, we have about 11 tables of taxes, and I'm very glad that he highlighted that from your taxes. Corporate income tax, tax, this tax, duty, even bringing it to pay as you earn. Now, that is not bad, it's very good, but that alone to you will tell you that IFF is inevitable. Because one, there are people that would avoid going through the proper remittance system and do other things, okay? Because probably they are below the threshold of what is supposed to be paid. I'm just trying to contextualize and provoke a situation. Then we're talking about domestic resource mobilization. What is domestic resource mobilization? Process of which maybe Zambia as a country would use ungenerated resources to cater for immediate economic sparing or development activities, your schools, road network, health side, and. Those are some of the things. Have we really harnessed the domestic resource mobilization process in country? The closest we all know is via taxation. The non-revenue side of things, we've really played around with it and treated it with plastic gloves. I'm building context to say, look, sometimes we are our own roadblock. We have promulgated the illicity side of things. And I'm very happy that now ZRA has come in with quite a lot of education, awareness, channels to mitigate. Why don't we also speak about relaxed taxation, and why also not probe the structural deficiencies in terms of the legal framework and all these frameworks that we have that supports around governed business operations in the country. One of such, and I want to delve in that area, one of such is the element of us selling ourselves as a country with no exchange controls. How many of these guys that have come in the country and have said, in the name of FDIs, investors, and at will to repatriate freely, and I mean freely, their financial assets to where they are coming from? That alone has a certain leg that facilitates the illicit flows in the country. We should be probing those things. Let me go to the mining side of things. The mines equally. I am Zambian, and I'm very happy that we're a country endowed or pregnant with natural resources. But the values you heard what the director from the mining side was talking about, that angle also has a huge portion of the IFF we're discussing now. Why? Maybe we've treated them with plastic gloves or baby gloves here and there. And that's why I made that submission when he was presenting to say, look, we need to enhance the audit and surveillance side of things in certain sectors. These are where the loopholes are. In other jurisdictions, South Africa for crying out loud, and probably somebody would argue to say the report I want to reference here is something that speaks to listed entities or listed institutions. Mining companies that have gotten it big in this our country, and ZRA, please, I'm presenting this to you in plain black and white. Mining companies that have set camp in this country, they have not listed on the stock exchange of this country. How's that for domestic resource mobilization? They have not listed. As if that is not enough, you go further and give them the mineral royalty tax side of things. We don't have a capped expectation when it comes to mineral royalty side of things, okay? Now, why should they be finding it very easy to play in here and respect certain processes where they're coming from? I talked about the submissions in terms of audits. There's still loopholes there, and I can prove that. But where they're coming from, you find that they're subjected to, I think someone can look this up, a competent person's report. This is a very rigorous report that speaks about exploration in mine, resources mined, prices at which you are doing that, and quite a very robust report. That alone, if it's presented to the authorities like ZRA, Minister of Finance, people are able to gauge, assess the sort of remittances that are expected in terms of taxes, as well as how much money is being taken outside. Okay, these are just some of the discussions that I'm bringing there. Now, domestic resource mobilization, we've got very low-hanging fruit in country as a nation where maybe if we worked well in the 5 years we could give ourselves as a litmus test, we will not be happy to stand on podiums and speak about half of the budget being raised through SDRs. We can raise and support our budget through localized mechanisms. NAPSA, example. NAPSA, I think we needed them in the house. NAPSA can really work hard in the domestic resource mobilization side of things. And how can they do that? When there is more money for SME development in country, provided, okay, let's say they came up with a SME fund. More jobs, more SMEs, what does that translate to? The revenues they are collecting, what does that translate to? Treasury bumping up their collections. What does that translate to? Economic development and resource mobilization. Certain things we can fight using our own resources. But we've not really harnessed that. So that's why I said, let me tackle this twofold. One, I'm talking about the reforms that we're discussing from morning to now. We really need to understand that was the question I posed to Honorable Kabaya and the other colleague. What is the problem? Where are we going? Let's not delve into the research, the findings, the theories, the peer reviews that we're talking about. UNCTAD, OECD, 8 billion, what missing? What are we doing as a country to arrest and probe the IFF side of things? So we are saying, look, if we really looked into the low-hanging fruits that we have, we need not even to sweat blood to understand this is how we're going to curb illicit flows in terms of the financial side of things. We can easily come up with reforms that looks at a customized way of adding value to both what is coming and what is supposed to be going out of this country. So I thought I should just provoke us a little bit and say, look, let's not really follow the masses. Yes, this is a problem that works, that is everywhere else, but as a country we can customize and do this thing using our own ways to raise one awareness, like you mentioned. It should not only be the government, ZRA. That's why I said us as the private sector, the public sector, the people here, stakeholders, at the supply side of IFFS. We've been in contact with this, probably it has disguised itself here and there. But there are certain things we need to be doing. I mentioned something like the stock market. How well are we using the stock market and probing that the people that are playing in this market? You'll find that 95% of the people that are in the bond market, both government securities and private, are people coming from outside. How are we, in terms of infrastructure, to attest whether that money is not maybe through anti-money laundering practices, illicit flows, and all those things that my colleague from ZRA outlined? Do we have the infrastructure? Banks, MFIs, academia, in fact, business management organizations as ourselves, how are we probing that? We really load very much, and I'm concluding, moderator, we load very much when we see our cooperating partners or investors speak $300 million coming into Zambia in Mopani mine. You don't care where the money is coming from, and you don't care how they are going to take that money out of this. So the structural efficiency I'm talking about is all about tightening our frameworks and starting with ourselves with more awareness, 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 and awareness.
One of my, I'm talking as an entrepreneur coming from the private sector, and I'll speak as someone who's interacted with other businessmen and women. One of the challenges that we've had, I think, in Zambia is by having punitive taxes. This has caused in tax evasion. If you have a relaxed tax system, you are going to find that compliance will be high in terms of paying taxes. One of the casing points that I will refer to is the issue that we had in the recent past, where we had smugglers smuggled liquor, pretending as if they carried coal from elsewhere. Meanwhile, it was beer. We've had, I think, a lot of challenges in that industry, and I think one of the reasons is because of the higher taxes in that industry. So if ZRA can start looking at relaxing some of the taxes, I think you are going to find that many companies and many individuals are going to be compliant, and in turn you are going to be making more money. Thank you.
I've got a question, primarily directed to Mr. Mlenga on domestic revenue mobilization. In your presentation, you did mention that one of the ventures you use to mobilize revenue is through domestic revenue and domestic savers. And in that regard, also Bank of Zambia comes into play as one of the major key institutions which government uses to raise revenue, primarily through the issuance of government bonds. Do you have a synchronized system at ZRA with Bank of Zambia that speaks to how much money is mobilized through government bonds. Thank you.
My statement is with regards to unfavorable tax treaties. And first, my statement is, I think as a country, we face a danger of making more treaties that are not beneficial to us, especially since we're looking at the aspect of competing with other countries like the DRC, which now has been competing with Zambia in copper production. So I think we should reach a point now where when we set these tax treaties, we should be able to benefit more instead of us losing out. And maybe my input would be to have treaties where when an investor bails out before we gain the benefits, they should be able to pay a fine to see to it that they comply. But my question goes to ZRA, the ZRA representative. Is ZRA just on the receiving end of these tax treaties, or are you involved in the formulation of these treaties? Because as Ms. Ellen alluded to earlier, most of these treaties benefits the foreign direct investors instead of us, the Zambians, and you as ZRA as the revenue collectors. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll be presenting on public-private partnerships in Zambia, looking at progress and emerging issues. My name is Malindi Msoni. I'm a research fellow in the Transport and Infrastructure Development Unit at ZIPA. So my presentation is structured in 6 parts. In the first part, we're going to look at why PPPs, why the renewed interest in PPPs. And then secondly, I'll look at what PPPs are. Of course, we can't talk about PPPs without really knowing what they are. And then I'll look at what has been done so far in terms of implementing PPP projects in Zambia. And then in the fourth part, I'll touch briefly on the policy and institutional framework for PPPs in Zambia. And then I also attempt to do a small evaluation of PPPs in Zambia and then conclude with a few remarks. So why this renewed interest in PPPs? I'm sure you're all aware that the new Dawn government has really embraced the PPP model for infrastructure development. And at this point, just on a light moment, it's been a year now, so I'm not sure when we'll stop saying the new Dawn government. But anyway, so there are 3 key reasons why there's been this renewed interest in PPPs. The first is no surprise to anyone. It's the fact that we've been running wide budget deficits for a couple of years now, and this has really been driven by our huge accumulation of debt. And I won't get into the statistics, but the major driving factor of this debt has actually been the need for infrastructure financing. The second factor is that despite the amount of work we've done or the strides that we've taken to develop our infrastructure in Zambia, we still have a huge deficit. And most people find it surprising because a lot of work has been done, for example, in the transport sector in terms of roads, airports, but the deficit still remains high. And the third factor, of course, is the need to promote economic development. We can't overemphasize the role that infrastructure plays in value chains. So services like energy, transport, communication are all factors that are very important for our productive sectors. So continued infrastructure development in these sectors is key. Now, what are PPPs? So public-private partnerships have been defined differently by different entities. I'll just quote here a definition from the UN General Assembly that defines PPPs as voluntary and collaborative relationships between parties, both private and public, in which all participants agree to share risks and responsibilities, resources and benefits. And then from our very own PPP Act, a PPP means any investment through private sector participation in an infrastructure project or infrastructure facility. So it really doesn't matter how a PPP is defined, but almost always it will involve a public entity entering into an agreement with a private entity to provide some service or product. Now, PPPs have several benefits. The first, I already touched on it, is the fact that it can allow governments to keep budgets and budget deficits down. This is because it's not always that the government would have to spend money to develop this infrastructure in a PPP arrangement. And then also because in most cases the actual projects are implemented by private entities, PPPs can allow governments to reduce their administrative costs. And then also by partnering with private sector, government can also diversify its financial and non-financial risks. So by entering into an agreement with the private entity, the government is able to share the risks with that private entity. And then of course, we know that from theory, the private sector is usually more efficient in delivering services. The quality and efficiency of infrastructure services can also be enhanced through PPPs because the private sector will most often have better skills and technology that may not be readily available in public entities. Then most importantly also, and in the context of talking about economic development, is that PPPs, when correctly implemented, can actually promote economic growth. And I'll emphasize they are correctly implemented because they often also carry a lot of risks, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So looking through the literature, one of the biggest challenges or risks that's associated with PPPs is the delays and cancellation in infrastructure projects. And of course, these delays often result in efficiency losses and tend to discourage private investment and disrupt infrastructure service provision. So some of the reasons why we see a lot of delays and cancellation in the implementation of infrastructure projects is that we tend to lack proper government guidelines and procedures. And then you also tend to have lengthy delays in negotiations between the two parties. Then also the issue of high user charges often results in delays and cancellations. Then sometimes you find that political interests also interfere with the delivery of these projects. And then the other factor is that there's just generally poor evaluation of projects, especially where due diligence is not done and proper feasibility studies are not done. So what has been done so far in terms of PPPs in Zambia? So far, we as a country have implemented 26 PPP infrastructure projects. And I'll just mention here that this is according to the information we have. Information on PPPs is not really out there, so this is based on the information that we're able to gather. And then most of these projects are in the energy, transport, trade and logistics, tourism, as well as real estate and ICT. But just generally, and I'll show this later, is that most of our projects, even if they've been commissioned and have taken off, have not been very successful, and we have a few that have had to be renegotiated and some actually cancelled. In addition to these 26 projects that have been commissioned and taken off, we have 31 pipeline projects that have actually been registered by the PPP department. So these have not yet been implemented, but they are in line to be implemented. This is just a distribution of PPP projects according to sectors. So you'll notice from that chart that the majority of the projects are in the electricity subsector, followed by transportation. And this is not surprising because these are sectors in which infrastructure projects are actually very expensive, and it only makes sense that some form of partnership is made between the public entity and the private sector to share the costs and the risks. Just to point to some of the few projects that have been implemented, you have the Bamboo solar PV plant. This one has actually taken off, and it's an electricity generation project with capacity of over 47.5 megawatts. Those that may not know, East Parkmore was actually also developed through a PPP. Then you have the Kasumbalesa one-stop border post, which unfortunately was reversed in 2012 and was later renegotiated in 2015. So these are just some of the few projects that have been developed under the PPP approach. So in terms of the legal framework for PPPs in Zambia, the PPP Act number 14 of 2009 is the principal act governing the implementation of PPPs in Zambia. And we had an amendment of the act in 2018, which largely just made provision for changing the PPP unit into a PPP department under the Ministry of Finance and National Planning at the time. And then we are also aware that there's another amendment that started last year but has not yet been finalized. So the fact that we have had amendments to the act is just goes to show that there's commitment from the part of the government to continuously develop the legal framework for PPPs. I forgot to mention earlier that some of the projects that have been implemented under this approach were actually done even before the enactment of an act. But then with the coming in of the act, what most stakeholders observed is that there was a bit of some structure in the way these projects were implemented. So that's a plus for putting in place a legal framework. So just one more point to note there is that, yes, currently the legal framework might be adequate for identifying projects and implementing, but the fact that we have some projects that haven't been completed to date is a sign that perhaps there's still some holes that need to be tightened up in the legal framework. In terms of the institutions responsible for PPPs, the PPP Act establishes a specialized department. I already talked about the department, and the council as well as the technical committee for governing PPPs in Zambia. So the PPP department works with other government ministries, agencies, departments to discharge its mandate. So for example, if a project is in the energy sector, then the PPP department would have to work with, let's say, the Ministry of Energy, ERB, and any other such related ministries and agencies. And of course, the acts that relate to those ministries will also apply in this case. The functions of the council include, among others, formulating PPP policies, approving projects, ensuring transparency, fairness, and equity in the selection of projects. So how have we performed so far in the PPP projects? So I mentioned earlier that information around the PPP projects that have been implemented is not really readily available. So from the information that we have, we know that there are 10 active projects, two are distressed, implying that the private entity has either requested the government to cancel the contract or to renegotiate. And then we're also aware of one project that has been cancelled and only one project that has been completed. But then for the projects that are completed, I would interpret that carefully because PPP projects are typically very, very long projects. And our first PPP project was implemented sometime in 1998. and you find projects that are 60 years long. So it's unlikely that we will record any significant number of completed projects. So in looking at the literature and a few consultations that we made with stakeholders, there are quite a number of emerging issues that we need to take note of as we talk about PPPs and thinking about whether this is a viable option for actually financing infrastructure. The first is, one, while stakeholders agree that the appraisal and approval processes for projects are generally transparent, time remains a challenge because they tend to take long. The negotiation processes take long. And if projects take long to take off, it tends to discourage the private sector from participating. The other thing is, and I've said this so far, is the lack of adequate communication. PPPs have not been adequately communicated to the general public, as most people remain unaware of the implementation structures. So if the general public is not well communicated to about PPPs, it means that even prospective private companies that can actually partner with the government may not also be aware of the implementing structures. So in terms of thinking about encouraging the private sector to come on board, the government needs to improve its communication strategy on PPPs. The third and final thing that I want to talk about is obviously funding and managing of fiscal risks, and I'm sure this is something that most of us would be interested in because we are getting into PPPs more aggressively now because of the financing challenges that we are facing. So it's very important that if we're entering into PPPs, it's with as little cost as possible, especially in thinking about debt.
I want to talk about public-private dialogue leading to PPPs. So why the dialogue forum? Number one, we're an organized and structured platform that brings together the public sector and the private sector to look at bottlenecks in the business environment, especially around policies, licensing, so as to thrash them out in an organized and structured way, which is now called dialogue or known as dialogue. In that way, we accelerate or strengthen business growth. So even as we continue to facilitate and promote these dialogues between the public sector and the private sector, you'll notice that eventually we're trying to unlock opportunities for not just SME business growth, but also the formation of PPPs. So that is where we are. From the presentation that was well laid out from my colleague from ZIPA, you will see that in the definition of PPPs, especially under the United Nations General Assembly of 2006, it was clear that risks have to be shared between the private and the public sector. Resources have to be shared, benefits too, and of course growing together. That really culminates in among our objectives of ensuring that when we bring private and public sector together, what we're doing is building, number one, trust. And then we want to make sure that the resources that are available in the country are utilized effectively between the private sector and the public sector for growth. But at the same time, the risks. Because obviously you don't want the private sector to feel the public sector is comfortable where they're sitting. Probably coming up with policies that are hindering business growth. Whilst the public sector is also thinking, well, the private sector, no matter how much profit they make, they don't want to pay the taxes according to the tax brackets that we've laid out. In a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator, I will focus mostly on some of the issues that I've observed in terms of where as a country we could then leverage in terms of public-private partnerships, especially regarding the economic transformation agenda. And from the presentation, which was well done, one of the things I picked up was that with the PPPs, there seems to be a concentration on the energy sector. I think from the 26 that she mentioned, about 12 were particularly in the energy sector. When you look at the sectors that would be of interest to us in terms of economic transformation. And I think in the morning there was a mention of the fact that we need to be able to start from the agriculture sector before we even move into the services sector. Now, when you look at PPPs in the agriculture sector as an example, I think if you look at the list that was given, there's none in the agriculture sector. And we were talking earlier in the morning with colleagues about irrigation, for instance, as one of the avenues that we can actually use in terms of PPPs, because you have rain-fed agriculture in the country, which is depended upon pretty much throughout. Now, there's an avenue in terms of irrigation, which would be an alternative when you have bad rainfall, as well as during the off-season. And this is one area where PPPs would definitely come in and be handy to be able to support the economic transformation agenda in the country. So I think that going forward, given this new impetus regarding the PPPs, one of the things that we need to focus on is diversifying the sectors in which we have this PPP arrangement. Because I think the focus on the energy sector, while important, has had its downsides, and I think that's related to the debt story that we spoke about earlier. And I think Malini did every state that in a number of instances we've had to borrow in terms of equity funding for these PPPs. I think the manufacturing sector also presents opportunities that the government can explore in terms of public-private partnerships, especially for those big engagements in sectors like agriculture, where we do value addition. We already have comparative advantage in terms of the number of crops in the country. But how then can we engage in PPPs to ensure that there's value addition? So I think going forward, one of the issues that we need to focus on is diversification of the sectors. And then the other issue that was of interest to me from the presentation are some of the constraints or challenges that are preventing us from really reaping the benefits of PPPs. And what came out clearly is firstly we need to be able to enhance the capacity of the people that are dealing with the PPPs in terms of negotiation skills. And I think one of the issues that was mentioned was negotiation of contracts, for instance. If you are dealing with multinational organizations, you need to be able to have the capacity. So I think when we're looking at the economic transformation agenda, we then need to enhance the capacity of the people that negotiate. But on the brighter side, I think that we've seen a new impetus in terms of PPPs. And one of the issues that stakeholders have consistently complained about is the lack of a champion for the PPP agenda. But now I think that with the constitution of the PPP Council that was done recently, what we're seeing is renewed impetus. And what we hope going forward is that in terms of actually going through the entire provisions of the Act, there will be that action as opposed to just rhetoric that we've probably seen in the past, and the various provisions of the Act will now be implemented. So I think that the key issues that the government needs to look out for, in summary, number one, diversification of the areas of focus in terms of PPPs, and then two, renewed capacity in terms of the staff at the Ministry of Finance, and lastly, having that champion, and I think the President has demonstrated this, to be able to show the political will, which will then translate into action in terms of implementing the PPPs. Thank you.